Hello everyone, my name is Adrian from ALD, and today I have an ARC200 tutorial for you guys. Today we'll be looking at how to model typical office building, parapet building with like a storefront, and then also some basic sidewalk elements. And then in the end, I'll just show you guys real quick how to export an isometric drawing and then also a section perspective as well. So let's just jump right into it. First thing, we'll be looking at this office building that's from this site. And it's always important to kind of have some reference images with you. Since we're also looking at an isometric drawing, it's going to be important to also include a lot of the roof details that are here. So I just got this image from Google Earth. And we'll notice from this tower that there's really only one component that makes up its entire facade, and that's just this kind of like window component with these sort of blinds that are on the side here that stick out. And if we can model and dimension this single unit, then we can essentially produce the entire facade of the tower. So if we look at this massing that we have from the provided site file, it gives a basic idea of kind of the mass of the tower. But one thing that's really important is that the massing, or perhaps what's problematic, is that the massing is not perfect. So a lot of these corners are jagged, and then also the corners are also not square. And that's going to be a big problem when it comes to having right angles, adding details. In general, we'll just want to clean this up just to be safe. So what I'll do is use the box and use the three-point box, and what I'll do is just kind of make a new one, and we'll just extrude this to the bottom, and we can delete the old one. So we'll just make a new layer, call it office tower, and then we'll have a new layer called massing underneath. We'll just move that there. So next up, we'll want to use the dupe edge command, and then we'll actually want to array this along this top curve. I'm going to array it 8 times, and what that's going to get us is a total of 7 different subdivisions. Next up, I'm going to do the same for the bottom. And what I'm going to do with this is just raise it by 12 feet, which is like a typical floor-to-floor height for office towers. And that's basically 3.6 meters in metric. So from here, what I can then do is focus on these individual kind of components. And what I'm going to do quickly is just trace out this rectangle, and then we'll just grab it from there, and we'll actually work on it separately. So I'm just going to rotate it. Make sure you snap it at a right angle. I'm going to move it over here and just make it flat. And from here, we can kind of like look at our reference and then also model along the way. So the first thing that we'll actually do is to explode it. It's going to give us our 4 separate curves. And we'll notice that the windows sort of go up at the same kind of spacing. The heights of the windows is basically the same as the gap between them. So to replicate that, I'm going to divide this into 4 segments. And if we have our window along this line, or these lines, if we repeat this, what that's going to give us is a repeated spacing like this. So we'll want each of our components to kind of have that same spacing. And then next up is the columns, and we'll notice that the columns on either side of the window are the same. And what that's going to mean is that half of the column width will come in from either side. And just eyeballing it, it seems like this column could be anywhere from like maybe 16 to 20 inches perhaps. So maybe what we'll do is just offset this by 10 inches. I was just holding Option or the Alt key to create a duplicate. And so if we have these side by side, that's going to kind of give us this column on either side like that. And because this is a symmetrical unit, we can also mirror this. So we also have this kind of middle column running down in between. We'll just split this by these two lines. And then what we'll do is offset this perhaps. Is 12 inches suitable? Maybe a bit more. Maybe we'll do somewhere like 16 inches, and then on second thought, maybe we'll move this by another 2. So let's look in closer. So if we then split this line with these two, it's going to allow us to take the midpoint. And this is going to be our window. From here, what we'll see is that, of course, we have the mullion, and that's going to have a certain thickness. So what we'll do is, again, take this, split it using those two lines. We'll take these lines, form our rectangle by joining them, and then what we'll do is offset them by maybe 3 inches perhaps. And then this middle line, what we'll do is offset it by 1.5 inches, but then make sure that we check that it's offsetting on both sides. We can delete the center line, and what we'll do with these lines is use curve Boolean, and we'll just select the portions that we want to join. And what that's going to give us is this kind of closed polyline, which we can do is use planar surface. So that's going to give us a surface from here, and we can just like grab it and snap it back in place. Next up, if we look on either side, we'll see that the columns, they do sort of stick out a bit, and then on top of that, each kind of spacing between the windows also sticks out a bit, while this kind of middle column is sort of set back. And of course we have the mullions as well. So we'll start working in 3D from here. This is our window, and maybe we'll make a new one called mullion. What we'll start with is this kind of column to the side, and maybe we'll extrude it by 6 inches perhaps. Next up, we have our kind of spaces between the windows, and maybe we'll raise these by 3 inches. And then this kind of recessed column in the back over here, what we might do is just make a rectangle, and again, make it into a planar surface. Actually, maybe we'll extrude surface, maybe by 2 perhaps, just so we have a bit of variation. Okay, that looks pretty okay. And from here, we'll also take, what we can do is, again, this time using Dupe Face Border, we'll just take those lines again, and use planar surface again to get these 2 rectangles. Make a new layer called window, and we could just chuck our windows in there. All right. And to maybe differentiate this from the mullion, I might actually just extrude the mullion by 2 inches. And from there, maybe I'll actually bring this up by a bit. So you can use scale 1D. And maybe we'll make this 4 inches. We'll make these 6 inches, perhaps. And we'll make this kind of column, let's say 8 inches, just so we have these kind of varied heights. And in terms of their kind of materiality, what we can do is actually take this middle column and maybe just make a new layer and differentiate its material along with the mullion. So there we have kind of some different layer hierarchy in case we do want to maybe edit their properties. But from here, maybe what we'll do is just select the stuff that we want to keep. We'll group it for the time being, so just group. And we can bring this to the side, and what we can do is mirror this. And what that's going to give us is our basic kind of unit here. So a few things that might need to happen. First things first, I'll ungroup them. We'll need to join this middle column, so Boolean union. Same for these. And one thing that's always good practice is to merge your coplanar surfaces. So that's going to kind of join all of the kind of subsurfaces together, so you kind of have very clean geometry. So we have our windows, we have our mullions, we have all these spacings. Next thing that we'll do is to take this and we'll actually make a block out of it. So if you don't know how blocks work, essentially you can make a basic component and it's going to be kind of instanced, or it can remain parametric. So if you create copies of it and you kind of disperse them throughout your model and then you make edits, it'll all change when you make your edits. So what I'm going to do is set the base point of our block. We'll call it office tower window. Okay. And next up, we'll just move this back over here, just creating a copy. And maybe the first thing that we'll do is just flip this and maybe snap this over there and rotate it in place. Okay. So we kind of have it along our massing. And from here, what we can do with our block is array it across. And actually, I just forgot one detail. We have our kind of little panel sticking out from there. So the great thing about these blocks, like I mentioned, is that if you double click and enter the block, you can edit it. You notice how everything else turns gray. So from here, we can kind of add our little, I suppose they're shutters. So maybe we'll make them, let's say 12 inches is perhaps too short, so we'll just scale 1D. Let's get this out by 16 inches, and perhaps we'll also make them not as thick, maybe just 2 inches. And we can mirror this across like so, making duplicates, drag it across, and let's make a new layer for them. Let's call them shutters, even though I don't think that's what they are. Okay, let's just make them green. Okay, that's fantastic. So I made those changes, and what you'll notice is that the same has been applied to this instance right over here. Now you can edit the block from any instance. You can edit it from here, you can edit it from here. It really doesn't matter. So blocks are really great to work with. So we have divided this kind of tower into 7 parts. So we can array this like so. And we're going to end up with 1 extra on the end right there. So we have this kind of row. And next up, we'll want to actually group these, and then we'll want to array this again, selecting this curve right here. But this time what we'll actually want to array it by is the distance. Just clicking distance at the top over there, and let's type in 12 feet. Okay. And we're gonna have a bit extra at the top here, and probably just want to delete it. We'll want to give ourselves a bit of space for this kind of top portion that we'll have to model manually later on. Now, you'll notice that things such as the center column are currently divided into these kind of halves, and also kind of split every single floor. And that could be the kind of effect that you want, but if you're talking about making 2D, so if we just make 2D real quick, it's going to create some inconsistencies in the areas where we don't actually want lines. So we want this column to kind of be continuous across the entire tower. We want these spaces to kind of be continuous as well. And what that's going to mean is that we're actually going to have to make some edits to our block. So what we'll actually want is to have a separate geometry that kind of covers both these portions, and then also columns that kind of span the entire height of the tower. So what I'll do is I'll go into the block. I'll actually delete these objects, but maybe before deleting them, I'll just copy them and then delete. We'll hit OK. And of course, all of them will disappear. I'll just press paste. And from here, what I can do is scale 1D for this. Let's bring it up to there. For this column, again, we'll use scale 1D. And this was 1 foot. I'll just make it 2 feet. Okay. And another issue with our kind of subdivision is that we're going to end up with a half column on the side, and that's just going to result in a slight kind of elongation of our tower. And you could compensate for this in the beginning. I didn't. So just be careful when you're subdividing kind of your buildings, making sure that everything is going to end up fitting along the set footprint that you have. So with this, what I can do is array this. And I'll array this 8 times. So we'll have all of these. I'll group them. And then we can array them again, this time going up. And again, we can set the distance at 12 feet to repeat. Next up, we have our columns here, and what I'm going to do is array this. We'll set it at 8 again. And we can select all of these, group them, and then scale 1D. And this time we're just going to bring them all the way to the top. You can delete this top row over here. Looking at this tower, yeah, that looks okay. And this bottom space, realistically this tower might, well, probably has a lobby, so you probably wouldn't have these windows going down all the way. And what you might actually have is this sort of ground condition, and these might even be halved in terms of their height. So let's just do that, and that's going to create nice little kind of lobby floor, ground level that's down there. So now that we've kind of fixed our columns and spacings, if we make 2D, we'll notice that our tower is a lot cleaner than before. You see that the columns are continuous, you see that the spacing is all joined, there's no kind of seams between them. Everything looks pretty proper. And another thing that's important to consider is also the sort of thicknesses that you have set. So our mullions were actually quite thick, they were 3 inches. But at this scale, they do read very dark. And you can imagine that if you had the spacing any smaller, then it might just read as a very bold or thick line. So that's something to be cognizant of anytime you're modeling to make 2D and to produce drawings. All right, so we have all of our components kind of done on this side. I won't bother kind of filling the other side, but it's essentially the same process where you would basically just kind of take your block, we'll rotate it by 90, and you would kind of continue the same process of arraying it. But because the dimensions of our windows, or units of windows, is set from the subdivision of this face, that what that might result in is the is kind of the changing of the dimension on the other side. Let's see, if we kind of array this by 12 feet, oh no, it wasn't 12 feet. It was just maybe 6. And if we have our column, this column right here, let's just create duplicate. And maybe we'll just like shorten it just so it's easier to work with. So if we have our column and we also array it, what we'll notice is that things might not fit quite as well. So if we just get this in place, you'll see that the pacing is not quite enough. So what's probably going to happen is that this kind of face is going to have to elongate a bit to compensate for the dimension of our window units. All right, so next up, looking at the roof, we'll notice that it kind of ends with this space right here. There's kind of these angled, I guess, barriers that contain the mechanical units that are on the roof of this tower. So all of it comes from these columns on the four corners. So what we'll do first is we'll actually cap these. Down there. Okay. And from here, maybe we'll just do a dupe face border. Oh, sorry. I'll just group these real quick, and we'll also extrude them up. And let's just say maybe like 20 feet, go a bit higher, maybe 24 feet, just twice the floor-to-floor height that we have. Okay. And from here, we'll also kind of lower this to that level, the initial massing. And once you have kind of all four sides of the massing cladded, essentially, there's kind of no need to keep it around, especially because it overlaps with our windows, and that might cause some problems when making 2D. So we have our basic columns on these corners. I don't think we extruded them as solid, so we'll just cap them. Next time when you extrude something, just make sure that you extrude it as a solid. Just hit solid, extrude as a solid, very useful for creating closed objects. Okay. So from here, what we'll actually want to do is to remove or explode this box, and we'll just keep this outer surface here, delete everything else. Same goes here. Deleted the wrong one, but just move this in place. Okay. And what we'll want to do is just mirror this at 45 degrees. Same over here. Okay. And from here, we'll want to make our move towards the center. So before that happens, maybe we want to define our sort of boundary. So if we make a box, let's see. Maybe what we'll start off by doing is to actually create a rectangle. Make this a 3-point rectangle. And we'll want to kind of get this inner bounds get it to this side, and I'm just noticing that this surface wasn't kind of mirrored properly. Do that again. Maybe there's like some problems with my ortho. I'll just rotate this manually. That looks okay. Always make sure that your objects are snapping into place. Same problem here. Looks like the ortho was just off or snapping incorrectly. Just slightly off from 90 degrees. Okay, so we have this kind of like boundary rectangle, and from here what we can do is offset it. Maybe let's try 10 feet. We do maybe just 12 feet just to keep things simple. And that's kind of going to give us our kind of inner boundary for where all the mechanical will be contained. So from there, what we can do is just get our 45 from here. And when working with buildings and modeling in general, it's always useful to have what you're modeling being on ortho. So should have done this in the beginning, could have saved some time, but just rotate this. It's gonna make things a lot easier. You can always rotate it back in place. What you can do is maybe save like a footprint. Save like a footprint underneath. And what you can do is just select everything, maybe minus your footprint. And rotate it like so. Just delete the other building. So from here it'll just be like a lot easier to work with. Looks like this one didn't move with it. That's okay. We'll just make a copy right here. All right. And from here, what we can do is actually join these. And we'll kind of bring them in at 45. Or actually, a better method, now that I think about it, we can dupe the edges of these surfaces, keep them as a group, and then we can actually extrude these curves. Extrude them in like that. Okay. And we can just join all of this. Maybe what we can do is very quickly just get those together, loft them like so. And then we can cap this entire shape so that turns into a closed polysurface or a solid. And from there, what we'll do is also just offset this kind of inner wall. Let's say it's around let's say it's like 12 inches. It's probably made out of like a sheet metal or something, so it might be thinner than that, but for the sake of representation, just keep it at 12 inches and we can extrude it to that height. And what we can do from here is to Boolean difference this, using that, and delete that. So that gives us our kind of wall and also this kind of corner connection to the column. And we can simply mirror this across. So taking the midpoint, mirror that, and that's our sort of boundary. So it looks like we have this kind of middle portion sticking out. Suppose that's like a room, and then we also have these boiler units. So maybe starting off with our boiler units, we see that There's 3 of them that kind of fit along this side pretty evenly. So first thing we'll do, again, dupe edge from here. We'll just remove that. We'll just work in the air. And from here, we can divide this by 3, and then split this line using those points. It's going to give us these 3 segments. And using the gumball to create our offset, what we'll do is shrink this along this axis by maybe 90%, like so. Actually, maybe we'll do that one more time. Okay. And we'll also just extrude them. And for this, maybe we'll set our direction. To create the base of our boiler units. And maybe we'll set them at 14 feet. From here, we can extrude these surfaces by, let's say, 16 feet. Okay, that looks great. And these are the basic spacings for our units. And we'll just work on one of them since they're all identical. It looks like they have 6 of these fans and the blades are just kind of there. Looks like around 8 blades perhaps. So we'll do face border, the top, get this boundary, and then we'll actually offset this by 6 or maybe 12 inches. So we have this kind of boundary. And from here, we can just explode this, take this line, and maybe we can divide this by 13, and 13 is going to give us 6. So we can divide this by 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's no good. Divide this by 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those will be our spaces for the fans. So if we just take this line, split it using those points, and if we just create a copy, rotate it, this is our sort of boundary for our unit. So what we can do is create a rectangle using that. And again, we'll offset this maybe by 6 inches. And from here, what we can do is create our circle. And we'll just make that circle in there. Okay. First thing that we'll do is to extrude this. Extrude this by maybe 12 inches, making sure that it's a solid. That looks good. And we'll actually just array this. We'll array this using this line, this edge, and we'll make sure that we're arraying it a total of total 7 times. No, that's not right. Looks like we'll have to draw this line again. So we'll array it using this line 7 times. Okay. And from there, we'll just subtract using these cylinders. We can delete all of them, and that's going to give us our holes in the boiler unit. So from here, again, we have our center snapped as part of our O-snap. So what we can do is use a cylinder, making sure we're starting from the center. Let's make this like, I don't know, 6 inches in radius, and let's bring it up slightly higher, maybe like 14 inches, and then from there, what we'll do is make a line. This will be our fin. We can raise this 12 inches, and from here, what we can do is use offset surface, and we can offset it on both sides, and maybe we'll just offset it by an inch, just so it reads in our drawing. Okay, this is very basic. One thing you can do is to also kind of taper it if you want to lower one of the edges. That'll just create a nice little taper. And you can also subtract this outer wall. You'll notice that it is rounded, and if it's just like kind of square, then it might actually interfere with the edge and it won't make 2D properly. So with this, what we'll do is just array around here, let's say 8 times. It's going to give us our fins. That looks good. We'll just group these together and array this. Oh, that's the wrong number. Seven. There we go. Okay, that's our kind of boiler unit, and seems like there's like a lot more details to it. Seems like these portions sort of get sectioned off. And just to create those seams, what we can do very simply is to create some subtractions from here. So maybe we'll create midline like that. And from here, we'll also create midline from there. We can group these two lines together. We can extrude them down, maybe by, let's say, 36 inches. And we'll just take these surfaces, and again, like before, we'll just offset the surface. And in this case, we'll do both sides as well. And an inch seems okay. That's good. And we can Boolean them together. And from there, we can subtract them from our main mass. After deleting it, what that's going to do is just like register a sort of datum. Oh, where'd we go? Sort of datum on our unit here. So let's say we make 2D. So with that, we kind of get some additional detail. Obviously, these are kind of our like polylines that we were working with, but it creates some kind of like divisions within our unit. Obviously, you can kind of like add your own line hatches on here as well afterwards, but gets the basic idea across. So what we can do is isolate this. We'll select the curves. We'll delete them because we don't want them to be part of our Make 2D. And we can just show everything again. Let's make this into a block. Let's call it boiler unit. And at this point, I'm not really concerned about assigning proper layers or layers to my objects or objects to my layers, but you should be keeping yourself organized. We'll just group these to be deleted later, and what we can do is just copy this across. So these are our units done. And you can see when we bring them back, let's just maybe snap this to the wall. That's good. And bring it out by maybe 6 feet. And you can see that we have some pretty nice boiler units. And it also seems like maybe our sort of like bounding wall might be a bit too large. So we'll do a Boolean union, again, merging all the faces. And we can bring this down maybe, let's say 16 feet. All right. So with the rest of the details, we obviously have this like top kind of like parapet room, whatever that is, some random details here. And for the most part, when you're talking about creating isometric drawings, a lot of these details can be faked, or at least made very simply using basic geometry. So something like that top little room could just be a box that is extruded. Turn off our center snap. Bring this up a bit higher. From here, taking the face border, we're offsetting it maybe by 6 inches, and what we'll do is actually use this to extrude downwards by, let's say 12 inches, and we'll just subtract that top bit, and that's going to help us create this little parapet. And of course we also have a door. A basic door dimension, we'll just start from the center, is around, let's see, it's like 6 by 9. Actually, no, that's far too much. Maybe 4 by 9 feet. And with this, maybe we'll punch it in around like 6 inches. And if we just subtract using that, then we have our little kind of door. And if you really want to create a door frame around it, what you can do is dupe edge, take these edges, join them, offset them, maybe by 6 inches, that's good. You can select them, and then what you can do is loft them together. That's going to give you this surface. Again, we can merge this. And if we offset this, let's say by 3 inches, and making sure that we're not offsetting on both sides. Wrong side, that's okay. You can have a little door frame. So, like very simply, just those simple moves can get you a lot of detail. So if you're making 2D, all these details will kind of show up. You can imagine you might have some hatches that might happen there. But if you just kind of keep repeating this type of detailing, eventually it'll start looking quite good. You can imagine adding perhaps a few cylinders just to represent maybe some like basic exhausts. You can change their kind of scale, make them shorter, whatever you want. But simply dispersing them across the building just makes it look a whole lot better.